Guys. Uh, all right, guys. This is supposed to be a raw conversation. It's still supposed to be raw footage between me and someone you instantly recognize. I ask the questions you all wanted to know, but this is a little bit different today. You might recognize Craig Clevenger, who is the author of Mother Howl, Dermaphoria, and the Contortionist Handbook. Am I forgetting one?
I wish you were, but no, there is only three so far. I'm squeaking out a fourth as we speak.
All right. And there's a reason why we're talking. Long story short, I think it was in December. I ordered two books from an author I really like. You might know him, Greg. His name is Eric Pruitt.
I know the name. I woefully have not read him. No.
And Amazon's algorithm suggested that I buy Mother Howl right with it. And I'm like, I like the Contortionist Handbook. I haven't read Dermaphoria. I'll just try it. And I ordered Mother Howl. It came. I read it. I reviewed it. My review was mostly negative. It's by far not the most negative thing I've ever written in my life. I've given like zeros. I've given like 0.6, I think, to a movie, but I gave 5.9, which is pretty low. And I didn't tag you when I shared it on Instagram. I was like, okay, like let's not be sadistic about it. And then my friend Andrew Nolan, who is an academic and a great musician, he sent me via DM on Instagram. Hey, I think Craig Clevenger has answered your critic, and basically, if I'm paraphrasing your critic, it was like, "Ow, it hurts."
That's a great paraphrase. You should. So it. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me.
No. Well, that's it. And that's it. So I contacted Craig, and I was like, "Hey, Craig, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's put it on YouTube. Let's write about it on each our platform. Craig on your Substack, me on Dead End Follies. If you want to see Craig's answer to my critic, it's on his Substack still. I think it's the last thing you wrote.
It's the Dunning-Kruger roller coaster is closed for
Yes.
repairs. A cumbersome but genius headline, if I do say so myself.
I loved it.
Layers of humor there.
So, Craig, how are you?
Good. So yeah, I responded to kind of give my summary. You didn't have
Yes.
to tag me. I follow you on the socials, and I really like your criticisms, your reviews. I said so much. I said as much in my response. You're not snarky. You are not trying to promote yourself or do something for your own exposure at the expense of the people you review. You have a very specific aesthetic. You're upfront about that, either explicitly or clearly implicitly in what you review.
That's
And
a good way to put it.
Yeah, I get a sense of where you're coming from, just seeing your lovely contrast in subject matter, the hardcore extreme death metal and the literature. I love that. So I've had all writers get negative reviews. I've had more negative reviews from Mother Howl than anything else. The more a writer has experienced, the less time they spend fixating on reviews. So I don't really count them. Most of them roll off my back. I took yours seriously because I respect your criticism. And so my response was not so much a rebuttal as really taking to heart some of the points you made. And there's only one great issue I have, but it's not with you.
Okay.
Is that a fair summary of my response?
Absolutely. But what is that great issue you have? I'm curious.
The issue is where the the essay sort of winds down. It's me wondering how the shadow of the handbook is going to be cast over everything I write since then. On one hand, I'm grateful. That book is the reason I have a career. That book is, I'm still getting royalties, small royalties from foreign countries for that book 23 years later. It was just reissued 23 years later. So in a lot of respects, it's the furnace for everything else I do. On the other hand, it really tends to eclipse everything else I do. The overall criticism is something is not like the handbook, or not as good, or it's too similar to the handbook, and I've never been able to reconcile that. And I see other authors who hopscotch from genres, who break form, who try different things, and don't seem to be anchored by any preconception of what they should be doing. On the other hand, there are many writers who never seem to get out of the shadow of one particular book of theirs, be it good or bad. Can anyone name another Anthony Burgess novel other than Clockwork Orange?
I can't. It's the only one I've read. I don't even
Right.
know how many novels he wrote in
Yeah.
his life.
Ken Kesey, for that matter. Maybe people think of the electric Kool-Aid acid test, but I don't know if he's written anything else. So it's good and bad. For me, it's frustrating because I want to push myself as a writer. So the points you made about Mother Howl in your review, I take seriously, and I think they're valid. I think there are some things I could have, as I said in my own essay, I could respond to them, I could push back, but I had my chance to do that in the novel. And if they weren't clear, then that's not a shortfall of the critic, that's on me.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've mentioned that, because the first thing I do when I have issues with a novel is asking myself, am I the problem? Is it me? Is it my perception that is wrong? And I say it in the review. I say there is such a thing as reading a novel wrong.
You did, yeah. I like that.
Because I don't have kids. It's really anchored about the protagonist Lyle Edison's fatherhood and his struggle to reconcile himself as a man in fatherhood. And I ask myself, like, I don't have kids. Is this the reason why I don't connect emotionally with this? And maybe the answer is maybe. Do you have kids?
I don't. So I don't think that's your. I
okay.
don't think you missed anything at all. I don't have kids either. I know kids. I've held them. I've kind of gotten an idea of what a child is, but that's as far as it goes. You know.
But the idea of like being railroaded because of a name was really interesting to me. But the way he got railroaded was very realistic and very not one-dimensional, but there was no way out for Lyle except the way he took. You know, so I kind of not seen it coming, but I was expecting a twist. I was expecting a surprise. I was expecting more out of Lyle than he ended up giving me. So I ended up feeling disappointed.
Okay.
And part of me was wondering if it was because of the other protagonist, whose name is eluding me. Icarus, exactly.
Icarus Jones.
Who reminded me of Pilgrim, the protagonist by Timothy Findlay. I don't know if you ever read that novel. As a Canadian writer who wrote a novel about an immortal being trapped in a psychiatric ward.
I think it's been done a lot of times. Yeah, and it's always it's a good trope. It's a fun trope to work with.
It is, and it is a fun trope. But I felt like they were like cannibalizing one another. So tell me, what was it that you were going for? Like when you started, conceptualizing Mother Howl, what was the plan originally?
I wish I could tell you I had a plan from the start and that's how it happened, but that has never happened with anything I've written. It did start out with the idea of having to wrestle with an inherited legacy, right? This idea of how, you will often read news stories and how someone gets just blackballed by an entire community, or, canceled, as we like to say, which I hate that term, but
so do I.
I mean, can you imagine being, Charles Manson Jr., right? Just how quickly you would get denied service at a lot of places, and how much spray paint would be hitting your house in the middle of the night. So that's really started there. It came about because looking at my first two novels that have a certain romantic core to them, but the truth is it's very shallow. Both of those narrators are very wrapped up in themselves and have a very adolescent notion of love and romance. This idea of surmounting your own baggage, your own obstacles for something larger than yourself. I am not a religious person, and as I've grown older and hit my shins against more of life's furniture, I've really come to understand the idea of something outside of yourself, bigger than you, that is worth investing in. You are not the center of the universe. What are they? And Welcome to Night Vale. The joke is death is only the end if you think the story's about you. Right? So for me, it was like having a character who just, after these first two, finally has to embrace something larger than he is. And no matter how legitimately dangerous and painful his baggage is, it is no longer about him. He's got a wife, he's got an infant daughter. He needs to suck it up and become a human being now, and no longer he was legitimately wronged in his youth with the false arrest, with his father's legacy, but he now needs to be bigger than that, and that was the core idea there.
Okay, it's interesting because I think maybe the thing greater than him, maybe like the wife and kid, was a little bit not romantic enough. We were talking about romance, were your earlier novels. I think they were part of what worked in them because they were dissociated from reality, and maybe this one reintegrated reality a little harder than I liked personally. Maybe some people are going to find like criticism is a very subjective art. So you probably had a lot of people telling you like it changed their lives and that they see themselves in Lila Descent, and it's possible because these people probably have kids. These people probably have faced the choice of sacrificing themselves for the good of a pure human being.
I had the chance, the privilege of interviewing Helen Phillips. I don't know if you've read her or not.
I do not know, but let's just me Helen, like Helen Phillips.
Yeah, Phillips. I think Phillips is spelled with it's two L's in Phillips, I think.
Yeah, she's a woman without hair.
Yeah.
Okay, I see her.
Her second novel, The Need, is on my desert island, top 10. Hands down. It was mind-blowing. And I had the privilege of interviewing her, and I won't spoil anything for the listeners, but it takes place over the course of an extremely painful, life-altering week for the main character, a woman with two children, a toddler and an infant. So basically the ages at which it is impossible to manage both of them, right? One of them is completely dependent. The other one is just a chaos machine, and it's really difficult. Her husband is out of town for that week, and the nature of his work means he's almost incommunicado. And I asked her why she made that decision. I said, the story could have just as easily been about a single mom, and you would have had all the attendant baggage of whether it's widowhood, divorce, single motherhood, or whatever. And she agreed. And we talked a little bit about those things being all fundamental sources of conflict in stories, right? Of character baggage in stories. But at the end, I remember this verbatim. She said, I believe that loving someone well is worth writing about. And
absolutely.
and she said, loving someone well, not deeply or passionately, but rolling up your sleeves and doing the work of sustaining a relationship. So now, mind you, this all came after I wrote the book, but but Lyle and Sarah, I did not want the extreme highs and lows of this adolescent, passionate stuff you get early in life or early in a relationship. I wanted to show Sarah's willingness to wade into the muck and be a wife and be a mother, and Lyle being called upon to do the same. And it was very important for me, even though she's not a major character in the book, that she is not there supporting Lyle. She's supporting it, but she's behind every great man is a great woman. None of that. She's her own woman, and she sees the marriage as a thing, but she is not there to dust Lyle off and console him. She's there to say, you're a father now, pull it fucking together.
Yeah, she was my favorite character of the novel.
Oh, well, that's nice here.
She reminded me of my own wife, who's like who's often like challenging me into action. Like, you're not, like, I'm not gonna do this for you. You're on your own for that. Just prove me you're a man and fucking do it. That's shit. And like, I responded to that, but I'm not looking to trap you into like my point of view right here.
No.
It's the circumstances of Lyle that just like accepting to be railroaded again and go to jail, and I was like, it frustrated me. That's
you mean in the I guess towards the third act, I guess we would call it, where he realizes he screwed up and his PO is going to know he left the county. Tell me more about. I'm curious, like, what about you found that disappointing, huh?
Yeah, because the PO was to me the antagonist of the story. By the way, guys, spoilers. If you guys want to read Mother Howl,
sorry.
Maybe you should read Mother Howl before you watch this conversation.
Yeah.
And it would make
Lyle's the name of his childhood sled, by the way, just in case.
And the PO to me was the antagonist of the story. And there's this great scene where one of my favorite scenes, I think, where he gets pulled over by cops and he gives them the name of his PO and they cut him some slack. And there's this ray of light on Lyle, as like, maybe he's gonna beat this. Maybe something's gonna happen where the antagonist is going to where the PO is going to become even more villainous, and there's going to be this confrontation, this like in French we say romanesque. It's not romantic, but it's like novel friendly, like this novel friendly confrontation at the end. But maybe I had the wrong expectations.
Interesting. No, your expectations are yours. It's funny you say that, because for me, I think Reed was the PO's name, and I don't know. I think Lyle called him his PO. I think PO is strictly something for parole officer, not probation officer. And that I don't know if that's a distinction that matters or not. But
is it? I don't know the difference between both.
Well, I guess I don't know the system. Obviously, you're in Canada, so you've got a different legal system there. But probation is in lieu of incarceration. You get.
Okay.
I'm not going to send you to jail, but you got to check in every week and do this or that. You got to abide by these things. Parole is after you've been incarcerated. If you've still got time on your sentence, you're still considered serving your sentence, but for whatever reason, overcrowding, good behavior, you get out. And you still have stipulations you have to abide by until your sentence is over. Okay. So one is pre-incarceration, one is post. Not a lawyer, not legal advice. So for Lyle, see, when I was writing this, the antagonist, the opposing force, was really Lyle's father, or more importantly, Lyle's idea of who his father was and how significant his father was, because Lyle has gone his whole life with his childhood fresh in his mind. His father was arrested for a string of murders. He became a social pariah, was jumped and beaten multiple times, outcast. But we learn later that his father has no infamy at all. He's not famous, did not get a fancy nickname, was not in the news, and it's only Lyle's hang up, right? I have a good friend named last name Bianchi, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Like
the name
the Hillside Strangler. The
Hillside Strangler, yeah. And it's never been been an issue for him, as far as I know, but since I've known him, it has not. And so for Lyle, it was his father. So for me, that apex moment was him actually meeting his father face to face for the first time since he was a kid. That's the only part of the story I wrote out of order.
Okay.
And so for me, that's what that was. So when it came time, when he realized that, okay, by sneaking across county lines to do this visit without telling his PO, his PO nabbed him. He realized he keeps doing all of this stuff at the expense of his marriage, his wife, his daughter. It's time to put a stop to it. And he realizes it may be the end of his marriage, but if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. So that was my intention there. More spoilers if you haven't turned it off already. I'm really happy to hear that Sarah. Her name throughout was really Zoe, but Sarah. There's a story there if you care. But anyway, Sarah.
I do. That's
okay. Remind me. So a dear friend of mine read an early draft. Another writer you should read, Caitlin Meyer. She wrote a memoir called Wiving, about severing ties with her Mormon roots.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, Caitlin Meyer, Caitlin with a C.
Okay.
And she said,
I got her.
She liked it. She said she really liked Zoe at the time. She wanted there to be more of her.
I agree.
And I did, and I kind of agreed, kind of didn't, and I was torn because it wasn't really her story, but at the same time, it was vital that she not be this loving, unconditionally supportive doormat, right? So I made two significant changes. One, I took every scene with her and I compressed them together as close as I could while maintaining the chronology of the story. But I compressed them together into two clouds, I guess, at either end of the story. So in a way, she bookends the story. She's at the beginning and at the end of everything. So she encompasses everything. But that scene where Lyle realizes he's made a fatal error and his name is on the list of, warrants in the paper. When I first wrote that, he told her, all right, this happened. I'm sorry. You need to pack up, take Nadine and get out of here. Because, social service, they're going to take her away. And she protests, she's angry, and she takes him. And I realized, so in the book, the change I made was he does not make that decision. She does. And that's a subtle distinction, but the reason I think it made all the difference in the world for her, because for Lyle, it was a reflex. Oh shit, I've been busted. Take the kid, packed and get out of here. Go stay with Ray. That's a reflex decision for him. Gut. For her, it is a much more fraught, painful decision to make.
Yes.
So the results are the same. The events that follow are the same, but putting the onus on, not putting it on her, but giving her the initiative, having her do that, she makes the decision that alters the course of the story, and it's a much more painful decision for her to make, and therefore reveals much more about her character. While the decision doesn't tell us anything we don't already know.
Yeah.
Whereas with her, it did. So that's the reason. That was a change that I made, and that's whatever dimension she has is a result partly of that. And I'm glad she resonated. And I wish maybe I could have thought more deeply about her as well.
But then this story you're telling with Sarah and Lyle, the way you're telling it, like it's a different novel. Basically, it's a different novel, and partly because half of Mother Howl is about Icarus.
Yeah.
So where did it came into this this equation? Like, did you ever think about making it just a shorter novel, just about Lyle and Sarah?
It's been, in fact, that was the next question I was going to ask you, was about that.
Okay.
Because one of the lines in your review that I really liked, you said something like it felt like two novels fighting for the same space.
Exactly. Well, we were heading at the same place right there.
Yeah, and I thought that was very well said, and that's not something, and that's one of those points I can say I had reason for that. That's not correct, but I had a chance to do that in the novel. And no, you are not the first person to make that observation. You're the first person to say it so poignantly and succinctly. But I had a number of editors and agents say, I'd like this if you just got rid of Icarus entirely. Nobody said, ditch the Lyle story and tell me the Icarus one. And so I kind of have to own. Now, some people have responded very well to that. I think your review reflects the majority of opinion. I'll be honest. I really do. Some people have responded very passionately and favorably towards it, but I think yours reflects the larger reception, but again, just much more articulately. But for my intention, there was a number of things as far as where Icarus actually came from. Hand to God, I couldn't tell you in terms of I've gone through my notes. I mean, I have boxes of notebooks and roughs and everything, so I couldn't find exactly the point where I said, hey, I have an idea. I don't know. So in his own way, he sort of fell from the sky for me. But I was raised very strictly religious, Roman Catholic, right? And so I was raised with the idea of divine intervention. And of course, I reject it now entirely. But I do think it's a wonderful idea in storytelling that can be used and abused if you take a really broad view of what divine intervention is. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I said this the other day on Substack, that demonic possession counts as divine intervention if you really think about it, right? So
I agree.
If you take
a fallen angel, it's a fallen angel that
exactly, and it's interfering with life on Earth here. So I love this. The reason I was fixated on divine intervention was because, again, it's all about Lyle trying to see the world as being more than just about him. And Icarus is a reflection of that. And I very much wrote them to be opposites of each other. In fact, I tried. Am I still coming through? Your visuals are stuttering a bit. You're kind of freezing.
You stuttered for like 2 seconds, but it's fine.
Okay. So if we need to stop and restart, let me know.
Oh, no problem.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show these people as opposites, as Lyle struggling to wake up to everything that is larger and greater than him in the universe, and Icarus needing to narrow down and focus because he's feeling his celestial brain erode the more time he spends wrapped in monkey leather, as he calls it. He's losing all the things he remembers from and it's very frustrating and painful for him. I tried to write it chronologically so that every scene that ended with one of them going to sleep or going unconscious began with the other one waking up. And I did that. I was able to preserve that most of the time, but not all of it. I wanted Lyle, the language I use for Lyle is very measured and precise. And we don't learn his name until 3 or 4 pages in.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Lyle slowly fades into focus like a Polaroid kind of developing. Icarus is the opposite. Icarus kind of crashes in a hail of fireworks. In fact, his name is the first word of the first chapter where he appears. Icarus fell.
Yes. Yes.
So I wanted to
Remember
have
that.
the opposites, and I liked the idea of divine intervention. You said Deus ex machina, and that's what I was trying to avoid, because I wanted to show them as both flawed men. Icarus at this point is a dude, and he's very rough around the edges. He is not I did not want to make him a beatific, genteel, caring angel. This is a guy with an axe to grind and is very intimidating and abrupt. So the idea of that was just forcing Lyle to see the world as bigger than him, and it's not going to always meet his expectations. It is not going to be necessarily good or beneficial all the time, but it is necessarily true, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. And like the exercise is interesting, and like you said, like you wrote them to mirror each other, but maybe like I understand like the presence of Icarus better now, but maybe he needed to, even if the book was Lyle learning to make the world about less than himself, but maybe like this relationship could have been more about him showing that to Lyle, because they take a lot of time before meeting.
Yeah.
They take a lot of time before meeting, and that's the first sign of frustration that I had at some point, because when you're reading it, man, I think too much about this stuff. Like when you're reading, you got some type of momentum, right? Some stories like lend themselves to momentum, some stories don't. And like I was just restarting, and Lyle I got, but Icarus, he was just breaking Lyle's momentum up to a point. Yes, up to a point where I got, oh, okay, now I get where this is going. But it took me some time. So maybe like Icarus takes a little too much space, a little bit too much.
And again, you are not the first person to say that, and I don't think you're in the minority of that. So again, everything I just told you, again, if that wasn't apparent in the novel, then that's on me and not the reader. You know, I have to own that. So that's why I'm enjoying, hearing like not just your review, but your thoughts behind that. And I see exactly what you're saying. And this is valuable because I've said before that a good editor is somebody you're glad is not a book reviewer.
Absolutely.
Right? and a good book reviewer is somebody you'd wish you'd had as an editor or early reader, right? Because the dismissals from early, agents and editors, it was just a brief mention of that. Some of the negative reviews have talked about that with not really any insight as to why. It's just kind of, I thought this, but the way you phrased it in your review and then expanded on here, see, that's valuable. A good review is valuable, that it gives me something to think about and work with going forward. That said, I understand critics are not writing for writers, they're writing for the readers. Nonetheless, I think if a review has any merit to it at all, it's going to give the writer something legit to think about.
Yeah, it's been, well, the art of criticism has been really co-opted by product review in the 21st century.
Yes.
Like the Amazon product review, the 5-star model. And like people are just giving opinions on stuff like, oh, I liked him because he was nice. I didn't like him because he was immortal, blah, 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 blah. But a criticism starts with the book, starts with your relationship with the book. And, as you said, I have to keep it real for my readers. Like I got maybe like 20,000 readers a month. And I have to keep it real for them. But in the same time, I've been on your end too. I've wrote like more skating reviews when I was a lot younger, and I got absolutely demolished by mobs. So I don't know if you remember an author named Andrew Bach.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You mentioned that in your email to me. I love Andrew Bach, but he didn't come after you, but his readers did, right?
Oh yeah, but I think it ended up on a forum somewhere. Maybe he put it, maybe someone else put it. But I had like, and I was young. I was like 28 years old. I'm 42 now, and I was not ready to receive this
Yeah.
level of vitriol. So I really, it took some time for me to be able to write negative reviews again. But it's really, I really need at least to offer something solid. Like I have to back myself up in order to and start from my perception of the work, and then the author takes whatever they want out of it.
And I think you I mean, like me, like I said, you just hit your shin against enough of life's furniture that
Exactly.
you can't always just, read a lesson and put it into practice. Sometimes you've got to learn the hard way, just life in general. That's reading, writing, parenting, whatever. What I think is funny about the blowback you receive from that is that if you know anything about Andrew Vax at all, excuse me, he doesn't need anyone to come to bat for him. Like
No, I don't think
he
so.
does
I don't
not
think so.
need anyone's help. This is a hard man.
But the book was terrible. The book was
Which book
called
were you referring?
It was called Strega. I deleted it because as I said, I was not ready to emotionally to manage that. But if I remember, there was a woman like doing kung fu naked, doing kung fu katas naked in the book. I was supposed she was
Oh, okay.
supposed she was supposed to be the love interest. It was very cartoonish, but it took itself seriously. But the
Right.
thing is with Andrew Vaches is that he had this thing called Protect, and a lot of people use the idea of protecting children in order to be assholes. As like
We
just
could
look
go
at
for hours on that subject. Yeah.
just
Again,
just just look at the Pizzagate thing.
yeah.
Oh, there are some pedophiles in the basement of a pizzeria in the Washington D.C. Just it's the idea of defending children that made people feel noble.
Trust me, like I said, I was raised strict Roman Catholic. I grew up
Mhm.
with a front row seat to that. Think of the abortion, the innocent babies, blah, blah, blah. But as
Yeah.
soon as there was an accusation of, they call it abuse or molestation, it's fucking child rape. Let's just call it
Oh
that. That's
yeah.
what
Oh
it
yeah.
is.
Big time.
As soon as that comes up, the churchgoers circle the wagons around the accused, and
Mhm.
it's never justified. It never works well in their favor. But every time, so when people can get very self-righteous when it comes to protecting the children in the abstract,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
when they're a nice stand-in for all the
Mhm.
things about how precious life is, but when it becomes real, we see this
Mhm.
over and over again. Children and women, for that matter. How many accusations did it take to even get the time of day from the system for Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein, right? So yeah, when it becomes real, they suddenly, like, when it becomes real in a way that threatens their worldview, they get very defensive, and they really start to calcify their stance. And Pizzagate's a good example, and all the right wing stuff we're seeing now. Whereas with Andrew Vax, I don't think he had much patience for any political extreme. And he is very articulate when it comes to why he does what he does. And I think he can easily dismiss the people that are here in it for the abstract. My hunch is the people that were so vitriolic towards you were people that have probably benefited greatly from his work. It's been very healing for them.
Mhm.
Now that we're talking, I would encourage everyone to please go read the review of Mother Howl on Dead End Follies. Please don't. I mean, I think it's worth reading. I think it's you make some good points and you have some insight, but don't send hate, guys. Don't do that. Can I take the wheel for a second here?
Yeah, sure.
And let me just ask you then, because there's two things I want to. Let me start with this: the larger role of the critic in the world
Mhm.
here. People very often do it for their own stature, in the social media world, or
Mhm.
their own, likes or whatever, or just their own ego. It's really fun to take shots at somebody
Mhm.
anonymously who can't defend themselves. You're not doing any of that. you're not interested in how much a book sells or doesn't sell, right?
No, because it was already like the die was already cast for Mother Howl. It's been out for what, over a year.
Yeah, and you're not getting any you don't have an affiliate link or anything. So assuming you're walking the walk, what do you think the role of the critic is then? I know that's a really broad, vague, stupid talk show question, but I am curious because you seem to have a real good handle on it.
I'll tell you what it is for me. And I'm a disciple of a guy. I don't know if you know him. His name is Chuck Klosterman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like basically the day I've read Sex, Drug, and Cocoa Puff, I think it was in 2010, I kind of understood what my purpose was. And he put it better than I could put it myself in a podcast he made for The Ringer called Music Exists. It's the world's just more fun when you think about stuff too much. The world's just more fun when you overthink stuff and you pick them apart and you deconstruct things to the extreme. I just like doing it. I just like doing it. I feel like it's my form of self-expression and to discuss art. And I'm a good audience usually. Like Mother Howl resonated less with me, but I rarely give below 7 out of 10 on
I
stuff.
feel special now.
But I think I hadn't given a grade. I will talk about it later, but I haven't given a grades to the Contortionist handbook because I was not handing out grade then, but it would be like 8.5 or something. It's a book I really, really liked. But that's it. I just think that the role of the critic is to make things more fun than they are, because there's an intellectual relationship to almost everything, especially culture. Like there's a reason why certain culture resonates with us. There's a reason why we get bored out of stuff like Star Wars and Marvel, because it stops being created from a place of love, from a place of creativity, and it's being sold now. So it's, to me, I'm a gold digger for works of passion, like passion and self-expression. I'm just trying to find the purest forms of passion and self-expression, and I chronicle my discoveries, and I'm chronicling stuff that doesn't work either. Like,
that's okay. That is beautifully said, and I like that. And forgive me, I don't want to paint with a broad brush or lump things together. I don't know how much of there's the cultural connect. You're in Montreal, right?
yes, sir.
So I don't know how much, what kind of telepathic link there is with French Canada and European French, but I had a moment of revelation, clarity last time I was there. I'd been to France plenty of times before in my former life in high tech, but never as an author. And two things jumped out at me that kind of coincided. One was my host when I first was picked up from the airport. I forget exactly what I asked her, but she told me that creative writing as an academic pursuit in France is very rare, and where you may find it, it's very recent. Traditionally in France, if you want to be the French attitude is cool, get a library card and a typewriter. There's no, you don't major, and there's no MFA there. And then maybe now, but again, it's very infrequent and very new. And I saw this reflected in the bookstore appearances I did out there. In the US, there's always a good chunk of questions that are, what are your influences? What's your daily routine?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be dismissive of those, because I'm one of those people still. I still want to meet writers and crack their code and see if I can use anything. I understand that. But the question, I got none of those questions there. They were much more insightful, penetrating, and probing. And what was beautiful, and this is so hard for Americans to fathom,
Mhm.
If I had to stop and think about something, I could sit there and go, wow, no one's ever asked me that before, and pause, 30 seconds of dead air, and they would wait. Nobody cared. It's not weird.
Yeah.
So so from there, it was soon after that I realized I was walking to one of these events with my host, and a different guy. In this case, he was my translator. And I said, mind if I just need to get a cup of coffee real quickly. And he said, of course. And this happened twice with him before I put it together. He would poke his head in a restaurant that maybe wasn't open for business yet. And they would exchange something. My French is very minimal and crude, but he would say, no, they said, it's okay, come on in. And we would sit down and they would bring us out tray, all the pageantry.
Mhm.
And I realized, I said, I've seen to-go coffee at the airport and a couple of kiosks in town, but it's not a thing. I realized, he goes, no. And that's, I understood. In America, we get a quick coffee at Starbucks and then run with our yoga mat off to
Mhm.
mindfulness class, whereas there, you do the mindfulness there. You sit and you enjoy your coffee.
Mhm.
It's not a thing while you do something else. You're enjoying that
Mhm.
and the company you're with. And that meshed with what I saw in the audiences. I think the French, and again, I don't want to lump you all together, but I'm sure there's a bleed over the French have elevated appreciation into its own art form.
They
When,
do. They
when you
did.
So people think, oh, the French are so snobbish. No, they really take appreciating something seriously, which means when you cook, when you are making wine, when you are making cheese or leather work or whatever, you bring your A game every time because you know somebody is going to really savor the work you put into it.
It's something I discovered recently too, because I've been to France for the first time in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize exactly what you're talking about. But even in as far as literature is involved, a lot of writers are critics too.
Of course.
There's Michel Houellebecq. I don't know if you know him. He
Mm-hmm.
was one of my favorite writers ever. I think he's he's like the literary equivalent to a pyromaniac. He just starts fire and he gets people fighting. He's amazing, but he's a critic too. He loves literature. He loves to read, and he publishes all sorts. He used to. I don't know if he is still now, because he's like almost 80 years old. So at this age, like, you get sick and tired of doing a lot of stuff. But here in Canada, we're a bit halfway. There's a strong local literary scene here, and it's been resurgent in the recent years. A lot of young people are writing. Not The criticism here is not up to point. There are interesting critics. I'm friends with a critic from a major newspaper here, but it's still blooming. Like, it's what you're talking about. Still very much a European phenomenon. But as far as culture goes, European people are like miles above. Like, they did the A game thing. It's real.
But I think the way you described your own approach to criticism is kind of reflects that, though, and that's
Mhm.
why I was reminded of that. But the other question I have then is as I wrote something right before this about separating the artist from the art. I had to say something after the Neil Gaiman revelations came out,
Oh
right?
my God, yeah, that was brutal.
And it's heartbreaking and everything. So what do you do with that? And I really wanted to, head on just dismiss this notion that, well, you got to separate the artist from the art. No, you don't. And I won't belabor that point. People can read the Substack essay. However, I think you have to separate the artist from the art is a very valuable, essential tool for criticism. I'm reading your criticism of work. I'm not reading whether or not you don't like me because of this political view or that life or anything else.
Mhm.
I don't want to read someone's, or if that's going to be there, I want to know the biases up front of a reviewer. So I think separating the artist from the art is critical for a good critic. But that said, back to my earlier point, is it very per critic, or is there kind of a guideline, or do you have a personal belief about when, how narrow is the vacuum? Are you review, and I kind of know the answer, at least in my case, are you reviewing the book as this book by this writer, or is it part of the writer's larger body of work? Which again, this gets back to me, like, living in the shadow of the handbook, which has good and bad, right? So,
which I had questions. Following this, I'm going to have a question about that.
okay.
But yeah, I kind of, I had expectations that kind of went along the line of handbook.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was seeing, like, and I haven't read Dermaphoria. I feel like it's a missing piece, and the only reason why I haven't read it is that he was not available around here. Like for the longest
Okay.
time in Canada, it was not. It was just unavailable. I looked for it at bookstores, and at some point, it just fell off my mind. It just slipped off my mind. But you were also part of this the website. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're part of this website with the Chuck Palahniuk.
Lit Reactor. Yeah.
Lit Reactor, but the one before, the Velvet, I think it was called.
Oh yeah, the Velvet was not. It was not part of Chuck Palahniuk.
Okay.
That was the Velvet was. So at the time, it was after I'd published the handbook, and Chuck Palahniuk and Irvine Welsh had both come out and kind of really kickstarted my career. Will Christopher Bear was one of my favorite writers, and it turns out he was living just a few miles from me.
Okay.
The entire time I'd been writing. I did not know this. I'd been a huge fan of that first novel of his.
He's good. Yeah, Kiss Me Judas, I think the name was.
Yeah, Kiss Me Judas, and he's got a Substack as well. So Chris, I introduced Chris to my former publisher, which I regret now. They're gone. I'm not going to go down that road. And at the same time, they had recently acquired a latest novel from Stephen Graham Jones, who had not become a household name at the time. And this is before social media kind of devoured everything. But we thought it'd be a good idea, to have a message board that, attached to a website. That seemed like a good idea. But since Stephen and Chris were both coming out with Macadam Cage at the same time, my old publisher, we thought we would share a message board. We'd have our 3 separate websites, but they would all point to the same message board.
Which was the Velvet. Okay.
The Velvet, because it was hardwired to Chris's website. He's the one that registered and everything, but he opened it up to ours and linking to it. So it was that. It was basically the triumvirate of us. And so that was there for a while before social media emerged, and Chris went dark for a decade, and Stephen Graham Jones became super famous and quit returning my calls. And that's cool, Stephen. Top in my wardrobe. I'm obviously joking. I personally, I think his ascent to household name status is long overdue. It should have
big time.
It should have happened a dozen books ago with Mongrels or Growing Up Dead in Texas. Anyway, that's what the Velvet was, and that's why the Velvet kind of went away.
Because this whole thing, this whole paradigm was like about transgressive fiction, about stuff we don't really talk about. So I had these expectations in mind when I read Mother Howl, and it was very impressionistic. But once again, I'm a good audience. I can work with something that's very impressionistic. But then there was like Icarus, who's, I wouldn't call impressionistic at all, and it just like I said, like they just pulled the rope in all the in their own direction all the time, and I ended up frustrated with it. So I guess that like I should have narrowed my focus bigger. But as it pertains to your other questions, the separating the arts from the artist, I'm usually good at this. But if I'm just like in the extreme metal, there are a surprising amount of Nazis.
Yeah,
like people who really zig heil and do really weird stuff, and I'm just gonna not talk about them. And I have a hard time just to go on Spotify and listen to a song and think to myself, I'm giving half a cent to a Nazi.
Yeah.
Like I feel super weird about this, but otherwise, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I mean, and that makes sense. You know, obviously, I mean, I like Neil Gaiman's work a lot, but it's really hard to have a critical dissection of him now, knowing what we know, right? But I guess
Absolutely.
my question was more specific on the critical side. If you know, if you do tune out the creator's personal life, and you look at the work as the work, where's that vacuum? Are you looking at an individual work? Or are you looking at as relative to everything else they've done? And I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule. Some critics go back and forth, and that's what I'm wondering. Because for me, that's a meaningful concern,
Mhm.
given that I've tried to make it clear that the handbook was its thing, and I'm going elsewhere. But as I said in my essay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I,
Um,
you know,
that's a good point. So I'm looking for cohesion from one week to another. Some it can be like look at Chuck Palahniuk.
mhm.
Um, all very different books, but it feels written by the same mischievous guy. You know, there's always this sense of like, I want to sucker punch you. I want to look at the underbelly of reality to it. That's this type of cohesion, and sometimes cohesion is lack of cohesion. Look at Ira Levin. Ira
Mhm.
Levin, Dean Koontz is another good example. Like these guys are just doing different stuff. So whenever I'm picking a book, I know in order to that I just have to disregard everything else that they did. And this for you, I guess the missing piece was Dermaphoria. Maybe if I had read Dermaphoria, my expectations would not have been tainted by the Contortionist Handbook, because there were similarities
Oh yeah, I mean,
in the
it's
protagonist. There were
right.
similarities in the protagonist, but I found that I think John Vincent Dolan, the name was.
John Dolan Vincent. Yeah, Don Vincent.
He was interesting. He had this squirmy thing about him that I like, and I like squirmy people.
Yeah,
I like people that are trying to get away with stuff, especially in the fiction more than in reality. But that's it. And this, I went from one extreme to the other, and I had only two books to base myself on. So your
right.
question is very spot on. Like it's forcing me to re-examine how I'm going to do this going forward.
And I appreciate that. And I don't think it's right or wrong or there's a correct answer.
Hmm.
I am just curious because I mean the critic's entitled to take whatever approach they would like, but it's something I need to be more aware. I've said very clearly in the past, I try to be a better writer with each book,
Hmm.
but I also want to be a different writer. I really want
Hmm.
to expand myself. And as I said in my essay, I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm ignoring a core strength and I should just stay in my lane. So I don't know. I'm not settled on an answer yet. I cut my teeth. I learned the craft by reading crime fiction more than
Hmm.
anything else, but I've always been drawn towards the not clear-cut genre otherworldliness, but the more slipstream stuff. I've always loved that.
The interesting part of crime fiction.
Yeah, I described this to my editor as crime. Mother Howl as being crime adjacent with a touch of
Yes.
magical realism is the way I described it.
That's a good way. That's a good way to describe it. And like one question I had about it's like I think I know instinctively the answer to it, but why did it take 18 years to write?
A lot of reasons. The reasons that I've been public about, for the most part, was just cruise missile of life. My publisher went under. They turned out to be bad people, wrecked me financially, and I ended up being rootless for a while, couch hopping, basically
Oh
alive by
shit.
good graces of friends and family. And I say couch hopping very loosely. I was not hitchhiking with a bedroll or anything,
Hmm.
um, but didn't really have any stability. And there's probably a lot of other reasons I will get my head on as I still struggle to write this fourth one, but also was I think it was what's the date? We are at the
We're May 9th.
So I am 8 days away. I haven't talked about this too much publicly, but I'm not shy about it anymore. I'm 8 days away from 2 years sober.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thanks. It shouldn't be something I have to celebrate, but I'm grateful, and I got to do it every day. But I did not realize how this innocuous habit was not so innocuous. I've always had a hard and fast rule. I don't write or do anything. I can't write or work with a hangover, obviously, and I don't write drunk or intoxicated. Simply, I just don't want to make that a habit. And if you ever read Dermaphoria, if I can find a stray copy, I'll send it to you. But I still owe one to Gabino Iglesias. I promise that I've not been able to find my stash. But if you read Dermaphoria, you will know that I don't do hallucinogens. The monsters don't come out unsupervised. So basically it took me about, it wasn't until I was 6 months sober before I realized just how badly it was sandbagging me. Just because I wasn't actively drunk or hungover trying to write didn't mean my brain was at 100%. Recycling day was an event. Let's just say that there was a lot that I'm sure the recycling guys thought 30 people lived in the house, so just because I wasn't actively drunk or sober, that constant amount influx of alcohol, your brain's just not at 100%.
And that failure, that thing that happened with your publisher after the success of Handbook must have messed with your sense of identity too.
Absolutely. And after there's a legal in the one of the second punchlines to that huge legal blowout before the Authors Guild swept in and saved everyone was the people who'd had it under option for film had intended to renew it and then said no, never mind. And then there were no takers for a while. So between going out of print, which is just a form of just suddenly being anonymous again, and having no one want to invest in your work was very much a blow, as well as trying to figure out how I'm going to live, how I'm going to work. And not realizing how badly I'm just hampering my brain. It took a long time to get back into the habit. The short story I wrote for the Amber Waves of Autumn is the first thing I've started and finished since I've been sober, and I'm gradually getting my strength back, my mental strength back to start writing again. So that had a lot to do with it. There might be other reasons that I can't get my head on because it's not been, a switch flipped back and I'm just blasting out pages by the day.
But I understand, and I understand more something that's going to lead me to my next, the other question, the big question I had, is the presence of Handbook in your life, the shadow it casts over your life. From what you're telling me, this shadow is parasited by other bad parallel memories of do you consider this part of a failure in your life, or you consider it a success?
Oh no, it's a success. Absolutely. I'm a different writer now. I'm a better writer. If I were to write that book now, it would be very different. As I said in the afterword to the new version, if I were to sit down I was hesitant with a re-release to do too much tweaking, because if I spent any time going through it, I would redline it out of existence, So no, I've wanted to be a writer my entire life, and I became a writer. That's not something a lot of people can. There's no calling card like a hardcover book, right? I'm very proud of it. There are things about it I would definitely do differently. Things about it I cringe about a little bit. That make me cringe a little bit, but no, it's not a failure. It's just there's two things. One, it does seem to cast a shadow. Like I said, with Dermaphoria, the negative reviews were split between too much like the Contortionist Handbook, or it's too different from the Contortionist Handbook.
Okay,
Like,
that's
what do you want me
curious.
to do, right? Pick one. But the other thing is, I don't teach. I'm not on the lecture circuit or anything like that. So saying, yeah, you're a published author, USA Today reviews and all that, and then you meet me and I'm basically, working for a living and driving a pickup truck that's about to die. I think people have this very I think people think all romantic. They think all successful writers look like Jonathan Franzen, that I should have a tweed coat and elbow patches and be financially secure, and that's not the case at all. And so
he is even he's going out of style. I love Jonathan Franzen. I think he's like what he does he's very good at, but even he is going out of style. But as I'm going back to Chuck Palahniuk, like, because Fight Club was probably the only work of art that changed my life.
Yeah.
Like it literally affected. It literally made me take decisions that led me here today. But he's always going to be the Fight Club guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you get solace in that? Like because like a lot of authors are like this too. Like Joe Lansdale has one or two flagship. Joe Lansdale more of a contemporary with you. Like you guys are doing different version of the same things, but he has like the Bottoms, and he has Cold in July, and he's just working his way around that. He's got these big anchors that pull him up. And like, how do you perceive like the handbook now as in regards to what you do? Like, do you feel like it's a detriment to how you're perceived?
I haven't landed on that yet, and that was really ultimately because it was the closing note of the closing line of your review that
it seemed important for you too. That's what's interested me.
So yeah, I haven't landed on an answer yet. I don't know that I ever will. The props from Chuck Palahniuk again really lit a fire under things. At the same time, I have been accused left, right, and center of being a Chuck Palahniuk ripoff, and this is for me. It's pretty clear that those kinds of things come from someone who read little else than Chuck Palahniuk, or base all of their reading around that, because if you've read enough, you would be able to see, I'll tell you who I'm stealing from, and it wasn't him. I think it's his timing that he is huge, and then I came along and he endorsed me, and then I was seen as a clone, and I think
I disagree with that. I don't think you were a clone of him at all.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you. But it's funny because when I say I'll tell you who I'm stealing from, the book I was really stealing from predated him by a lot, was Andrew Vax, Shella, which I think is Andrew Vax's best book, and it's one of the few standalone books he did, if he did any others at all. So I haven't landed on that because I do know there are writers who live under the shadow of one particular book, and whether that bothers them or not, I don't know. There's good that came from that because the book has sustained me. On the other hand, I get a little tired of it. Like, I've done other things that I think are different and better. That's my opinion. So I don't know that I will land on that, and I haven't talked to enough writers who have to deal with the same thing. I did mention Sarah Gran, for example. Sarah Gran and Paul Tremblay are great examples. Sarah Gran,
oh my God, yes.
Come Closer is a seminal horror novel. Sarah Gran hasn't written horror in at least a decade, maybe two. And she has firmly established herself as a very whimsical almost, but darker crime writer. Paul Tremblay had 2 crime novels and has now become a household name in horror. So how do I get to do that?
Yeah, not that many people do. Like, Paul had Head Full of Ghosts, which was one of my favorite things ever. and he had like this whole thing that was made into a movie by M. Night Shyamalan. Like the name eludes me.
Cabin at the End of the World.
Cabin at the End of the World. But like even like in music, it's rare that bands strike gold more than once.
Yeah.
Green Day did it twice with Dookie and American Idiot. Look at Linkin Park. They never hit the gold twice. They did Hybrid Theory. They went downwards from there, and like right now they're just redoing Hybrid Theory. So I think you've been to a place right now with Handbook where it's rarefied hair. It's rarefied hair, and like it should, well, as an outside perspective, I think it should just grant you the freedom you need to go in every direction you want. Like Joe Lansdale is a great example of that. Joe Lansdale writes about everything and nothing. He writes crime, he writes comedy. Like I have my qualms with some of his work, but he just writes. He just loves to do it. It's just, I wish I could write like Joe Lansdale, like with the same glee.
Yeah.
But
I actually did a panel with him years ago in Texas. He was a lovely dude.
Is he still? He's an older gentleman. Is he still around us?
Oh yeah, he's still around.
Okay.
He's quite prolific.
Oh yeah. Well, he's doing like, he's releasing stuff on the Amazon Kindle store. Well, a couple of years ago, he was like 99 cents short stories and stuff like that. I was in awe.
Yeah, he's quite prolific. In fact, I was on the panel with him and Stephen Graham Jones.
Okay.
And speaking of shifting gears, Stephen Graham Jones really cemented himself early on as a writer before he became huge, but with a epic crime novel. No werewolves or vampires or anything. It was All the Beautiful Sinners. It was a serial killer novel.
Yeah, I think was it the one that was released with it was the one that was released with Broken River Books.
I think originally it was with Rugged Land, but
Okay.
I know it's changed hands, I think, a few times.
He had this amazing novel that came out of Broken River Books. I can't remember the title of it, but it worked a number of The Least of My Scars.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
The Least of My Scars was a really good one too.
Yeah.
Like Stephen is like, he has this thing where he just loves to write. He just gets it out of the way. I wish I had that muscle.
Yeah, me too. I would love to just get some of that spinal fluid from him and see if I can use that. So, but back to your question, I don't know, and I don't know if I will ever have an answer to it. It is a really, I have to accept, though. I appreciate that it's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
it's a good problem to have. If it never happens again, if I never strike gold again, I still struck gold. And the truth is, I want to write regardless of whether that happens or not. I still have the drive. I still have the love for doing it. And I'm getting it back now, which I'm really enjoying. So
wonderful. Anything else you want to add?
Well, I should mention earlier, just for trivia, if anyone cares, mentioned earlier the name throughout the novel, early drafts, I had.
Yes, Zoe and Sarah.
Zoe was her name because no other reason than I like the name. I just like the name Zoe. It's a nice fun. I had a number of throughout the early versions, Lyle mentioned his previous. There were, Lyle ruminated on some of his previous romances, previous relationships, and one of them was Sarah. Actually, it was notes from my French translator, who actually acted as an editor in this case as well, Teo, who is really good. It was before I'd found before it had been published here a buyer in the U.S. I had an agent, but I didn't have a publisher for it, so I actually used Teo's edits for the source version that was published here. Anyway, he just suggested that the discussions or the narrations about Lyle's previous relationships didn't really bear much weight or make any change, and I agreed with him. but the name Sarah I'd used for one of those former relationships. And then Sarah, spelled S-E-R-A, was a deliberate nod to John O'Brien, Leaving Las Vegas.
Okay.
One of my all-time favorite novels.
I've seen the movie, but I haven't read the novel.
It's a very good, faithful adaptation with one fatal flaw. The assault, that the rape that happens and the abuse that Sarah endures happens at a point in the book. It happens before she ever meets the protagonist, whose name I forget now.
Okay.
In the movie, they had it happen after they met, after she broke his promise to him. So it was very judgmental and punitive in the movie, whereas in the book, it was just part of her past that she was bringing to him, which it was, the movie kind of victim blamed. But anyway, Sarah, that was the spelling of Sarah in John O'Brien's book. And I think it was meant to be reference to seraphim or angel. But I did that I named her Sarah with that spelling as a nod to John O'Brien, who I just love, rest his soul.
Okay. So when I contacted you to do this, I called that Writer versus Critic, Enter the Dragon.
Yes.
How did you feel about our Enter the Dragon?
Well, I just want to state it on record, and I said this to you in my response. I said, okay, I'm Bruce Lee in this equation. Just
I'm Chuck Norris. That's what I answered you.
Yes, and right on. We're good. I'm quite happy. Your review was not in bad faith. I didn't like it, but I couldn't argue. It was in good faith, and what's the saying? I would rather take the scorn of a critic I respect than the adulation of 1,000 morons. I don't know who said that, and that's not the quote, but it's something like that. It was worth thinking about. And I think it's easy for writers to say, just ignore the critics. And I think that's healthy to a point, but you're part of the literary ecosystem. You're part of the creative ecosystem as well. And your review had weight and merit that gave me things to consider seriously. And I knew when you reached out to me, I was delighted. I knew this would be a good thing. I think it's good for us. It's good to finally meet you. And I think it's beneficial to the creative community at large. If I'm not overstating the importance here, maybe it's just two of us blathering. I don't know. Tell
me, how did you hear about Dead End Follies originally?
I don't remember. It would have been a random social link to one of your reviews that I found really insightful. And I remember, and I've seen you skewer things before, and you don't do it in a dismissive, or you don't do it from a high horse. You do it from a sincere place. The Whale was one of those movies, if memory serves me.
Oh my God, I hated that movie.
But it wasn't just a visceral cancel culture hate. You came at it surgically, and it was hard to dispute.
All right. How
do you feel?
I feel great. I feel great. It was enlightening. It's always good to see the middle ground and to show people that we can talk, that we can disagree, we can see things differently, and we can talk, and we can be nice to one another, and we can enjoy each other's company, even if I did a negative review of one of your books. Doesn't mean I think you're a bad writer. I think you're a good writer, and that's about it.
I will wear that 5.5 stars proudly. I will go on record with that, and I will say, I think you're a good critic. I think more importantly, I think you're an important critic. I think, given, like you said, the current discourse of clickbait and purchase-driven stuff, it's really refreshing to read someone who you have an interesting aesthetic. The pairings of books, the combination of things you put up there that you choose to review is interesting. But I think you're important because you are doing criticism from absolute good faith in all the best ways. And
because I like it, and because I enjoy it.
Even if you don't like the work, you have a respect for the creative process.
Absolutely.
I think I would just add, a lot of the criticism I've heard about dermaphoria come from people who say this guy must have done a lot of drugs to write this book. And I don't. I drink a lot. I used to, but I've never done hallucinogens. If you think that a writer needs to be high or intoxicated to write about being high or intoxicated, you don't understand enough about the process to be a critic. You're you understand the process, and like I said, it's not just that you're a good critic and I like what you're doing. I think you're important, and I will wear that 5.5 stars proudly.
Thank you. All right, let me stop that recording. Let's
Sure.
continue to chat.